Hey, welcome to this week's Taiwan Talk. I'm your host, Alex Lewis. This week, we talked to Kitsch Liao, a cybersecurity expert here in Taiwan, about cybersecurity here in Taiwan. We talk about the threats facing Taiwan, what people can do to protect themselves from cybersecurity incursions, and much more. You know, the state of cybersecurity globally. And it was an interesting conversation for me because I don't know much about the subject. I feel like I learned a lot. And that's what you're looking for from these conversations. Please enjoy listening to the interview as much as I enjoyed conducting it. And here we go. So, Kitsch, welcome to the show, Taiwan Talk. Could you give me, your background in cybersecurity, and then can you tell me what cybersecurity is?
Well, my background was actually mostly in policy. That's actually what my job was. I wrote a few, primers and also attribution problems with regard to cybersecurity, and now I'm actually working for one of the cybersecurity companies as an analyst. Of course, more on the policy side, but, with certain technical backgrounds.
What is cybersecurity? What does that entail?
Yeah, so, the widest possible definition would be information integrity and confidentiality of all computer assets, which means basically, everything that has computer in it, from Taiwan's power plants, dams, military secrets, to your laptops, cell phone, your cleaning bots, hell, even your electric scooters.
Your Roomba.
Yeah, everything.
So anything that's kind of connected to the internet.
Not just the internet, anything that's, that has an operating system in it. Because, if you could plug a USB in it, they could be infected. Interesting.
Okay. So governments, let's talk about Taiwan. So governments have been spending more and more on cybersecurity and beefing up their cybersecurity space. How does Taiwan and its government and private firms here approach cybersecurity, and how do they compare to governments around the world?
Well, Taiwan has a three-tier system, I guess, if you want to put it that way. You got on the highest level, you got the National Security Council, which is, is an advisory body to the president. They have a so-called Information and Communication Security Section with a Cybersecurity Office as a staff agency. So about 20 people. They focus on policy. And then on the executive branch, you got the NICST, the National Information and Communication Security Task Force, headed up by the Vice Premier. And their, staff agency would be the Department of Cybersecurity. This is the one that people heard a lot on TV, on news. And their primary concern is justify, the existence, justify why they need budget, and, talk to the legislative yuan how they get budget. They are principally in charge of logistics, mostly.
Okay.
And then we get down to the operational units, basically who's actually dealing with all the intrusions and stuff. We got the Homeland Security Office. They're mostly in charge of, critical infrastructure, the security of our power plants, our dams, which means the things that if shut down would cause great harm to the country. And then we got the National Center for Cybersecurity and Technology, NCCST. Basically, they act as a contractor. They are not actually they're a private contractor, but they're maintaining the government's security operation centers, the government's information sharing centers. They have about 200 people. They do training, exercise, penetration test, whatever required. And then, on the tactical level, we have the TW CERT and the TW CERT CSIRT, which, they're in charge of exchanging all the latest, virus code, all the latest, indicators of compromise, to keep everybody up to date. And occasionally, they send out incident response teams to important, places. So
let's talk about policy. What is Taiwan's policy in regards to cybersecurity?
Well, if we actually follow the official policy guidelines, their policy is that cybersecurity is national security. So they are perceiving this at the highest possible level. But just like most of the other policies implemented in the national defense realm, they're also concerned about the industry. So basically, the government's working toward a collaboration between private firms and government agencies in order to not just reinforce, our cybersecurity, but also to develop our cybersecurity industries into competitive standards.
Right. So how is the cybersecurity scene here, or the government, reacted to the news of hackers influencing the U.S. election, hacking the German parliament, the WannaCry virus, all those things? How are they, interpreting this news?
So the thing is, like, it's not a surprise. Like, everybody knows this eventually would happen. Basically, what they're more concerned about is what kind of lessons you could learn from this. Because cybersecurity, especially in terms of government and major, like, corporations, they're more concerned about what is called a advanced persistent threat. That means there is an actor behind it which has, a significant amount of resources and people they could devote on a single target over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, U.S. election, German parliament, WannaCry virus, the first two could be classified as politically motivated. There is a country or, certain even mercenary units behind it. And the WannaCry virus, it's financially motivated, but the thing is, like, you can never be really sure because one of the trends these days is that it becomes harder and harder to actually differentiate between espionage actors and financial crime actors.
I see. It's kind of evolved into like a proxy type of situation.
Yes.
Okay. So what's Taiwan's main cybersecurity threat, or like what's that, the AP?
The advanced persistent threat.
Yeah.
And of course, the first one that's facing our government is like most of the security challenges facing Taiwan, China, because you cannot get away from it. They've been extremely active in terms of, intrusion attempts against our government, against our think tanks, against our civilian infrastructures. But some of the problems encountered when try to get this out, visibility-wise, the reason people don't hear much about Taiwan is because, well, China would have units targeting Taiwan specifically, and their operating scope, their targeting scope will be extremely limited. And not a lot of other countries pay attention to it because their target is only Taiwan.
Right. They're only affecting Taiwan, not other countries. Or they're specifically targeting Taiwan, not other countries. That's why other countries don't hear about this?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the PLA units, the People's Liberation Army units, have, been targeting Taiwan exclusively with some other countries, but less.
Okay, and what are we talking about here? Like, what is Taiwan dealing with in terms of the cybersecurity threat from China?
It's all-encompassing, actually, because Taiwan cybersecurity is, our attention towards cybersecurity is a very recent development. And before that, our cybersecurity policy, I'm sad to say, was less than competent. That means there's a lot of ways to get all sorts of information from Taiwan. And of course, reunification with Taiwan is a major goal of the Chinese Communist Party. So they've been collecting all sorts of information and, chronologically, as well as, tactically, as well as any sensitive information they could get. One good example would be like their activity during the Sunflower Movement. There was a clear spike in their activity during the periods.
What type of activity?
Oh, like, the most easy to understand would be their spear phishing attempts. Mm-hmm. They would try to compromise certain groups' computers, get in, and, steal their documents, and to use that as further spear phishing, decoys. Because, if you got an email coming from a person you trust with an internal documents, you'll be less suspicious. Mm-hmm. And, let the back door in.
I see. Okay. So speaking of letting China come into the back door, life is becoming like more and more like online and virtual, right? And I guess people are just more susceptible to things like this, or they're just more ways to impact a person's life through cybersecurity.
Oh yeah, definitely.
What are some steps that I guess the private citizen could take to ensure that they're protected from being compromised?
Well, the first thing I think most people need to understand, because this happens everywhere, including when I talk to my parents, their first response is, yeah, I'm not important enough. Nobody's going to try to steal my secrets. So,
That's exactly what I say to myself.
Yeah. It was like, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, man.
But the problem here is that, first of all, because of Bitcoin, because of cryptocurrency, everybody's a target. Mm. The targeting could be indiscriminate. Cybercrime is actually far worse, like in terms of scale, than cyber espionage. The reason a lot of companies focus on cyber espionage is because, well, it's exciting, it's easier to track, but cybercrime is prevalent. It's everywhere, and it could impact you in ways you could not even, begin to think. It could actually, for example, if your computer's being compromised, being used as an attack platform to attack others, or, if you have personal information on your friends, on your family, relatives, or even people you go to school with, you could be helping the enemy. You could be helping, others to basically, compromise your friends, compromise sensitive national data. That's all possible. So the first thing we could do is to maintain what we call cyber hygiene. Basically, the easiest manifestation of that would be do not ever bring your work home. Do not do anything that you would do at work on your home computer or on your laptop. Because the thing is, usually for a company or a government agency, they have a dedicated person for cybersecurity. They have the internal network. They would have firewalls upon firewalls. They would have, air-gapped systems. It's way more secure than what you could ever hope to achieve in your house. So don't bring your work home. And then, if you actually care about your personal information, one of the things, because everybody uses Gmail, is to turn on your two-step verification. This may seem really basic, but the thing is, Google just released their stats, last year, and very little people actually turn on two-step verification. If I'm correct, I think it's less than 10%.
Whoa, that's super low. Why do you think that is? Is it because people just, like you just said, that they don't think they're important enough to, I guess, warrant this type of security measures or protectionary measures?
Oh, yeah. Well, you never think it's a problem until it's a problem, right? Especially if it's only numbers, digits, and computers. But we got to remember, it's totally different now. Just last month, the crypto exchange, company in South Korea just went out of business because of that, because they got hacked. They lost 12% of company asset in one day and 25% the next. So that, well, I guess we're closing down business.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could lose everything you have just overnight.
Yeah.
And the other thing is passwords. Definitely change your passwords on a regular basis.
What's regular?
Regular. Basically, it depends. It could be what my personal suggestion would be, 2 months. Because the thing is, it's not just you. Even if you can make sure your computer is secure, you've updated all the vulnerabilities, Windows Update and everything, and you have antiviruses, it might not be you. It might be the person who's storing your information or storing your passwords. So change your passwords regularly and use a password manager. Right now, you want to use random password. You don't want anything that's related that could be easily guessed.
Right. You don't want to do your birthday or something.
Yeah,
right?
No, never. And not even anything that makes sense. So a lot of people like to replace their password with numbers, with signs. Well,
anything.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work. It's still as easy, to break. So the thing is, get a password manager, use random numbers, because you could never hope to remember the actual random numbers, especially if it's 12 characters or 24 characters.
Right.
Password manager is like a software, so you could use that, and you could access all your password, with a master password key. Or get a physical one that, you carry with you, just like a key.
Like pen and paper or something, and put it down.
Oh, yeah. That would definitely work.
Okay.
And, the next one will be the PGP encryption. PGP is kind
PGP?
Oh, yeah.
What does that stand for?
Encryption. It's actually it's kind of an in-joke, because they call it's called pretty good encryption to begin with, pretty good protection. So it's this is what we call, an asymmetric encryption. That means there are two keys. You got one. That's your private key, and you should never let anybody know about it. That means, put it on your computer, or better yet, put it on an isolated device, your private key. And then, you have a public key that you give to everybody. So when people want to send you private information, they could use the public key to encrypt the email, the information they want to send you. And nobody else, including the person who sent it, would be able to decrypt the message. Only you, with your private key, will be able to do that.
I see.
A lot of NGOs are actually encouraged to do that.
Right.
Because, the threat they face was, no less than the government.
Right. But what kind of stuff what kind of documents should you encrypt? Because I feel like the only thing that comes to my mind that I would need to protect would be, anything that has like my social security number or my the passwords, or just anything that's like sensitive information. But is there anything else that's kind of like outside that realm that I should be protecting as well?
Ultimately, it's about security. So, we could come back to the traditional realm of security and think about, what would be useful to a person who's dedicated to get you, to use you. So if we think about that, then anything. We could take lessons from open source intelligence. Basically, if I know your birthday, if I know where you are, where you work, or even where you go to school, who you're associated with, which is actually extra easy to find these days.
Yeah, on Facebook or something, yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, all the sensitive information, bank accounts, birthdays, personal information, these, and what you're doing right now, basically, because time is a factor too. So try to encrypt those. But the thing about security is, like, of course, under the ideal condition, I would tell you basically encrypt everything. But security is a hindrance. It's an insurance policy. So basically, you got to make some judgment calls there. And so that's basically, we could give you like an outline. Personal information, sensitive information. That's it.
Okay. So is it even safe to use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all those social media platforms? Would you advise people not to use that, or do these big companies have a good firewall or security measures in place?
If you're talking about like, the personal information you've registered with these companies, they are reasonably secure. At least they will be way more secure than anything you store on your own computer. And yes, you hear stories about their compromise all the time. But the thing is, compromises happens every day. Hundreds, thousands.
We just don't know about it.
Yeah, all over the different government agencies, they just never talk to you about it. So there's a good chance that your personal information has already been compromised without you even knowing about it. So, what we should care about in terms of social media is more about, do you want people to actually know what you're doing over the course of time? Do you want them to essentially cyber stalk you? Is that possible through your personal posts? I know a lot of professionals work in the security industry. They do have social media presence. They just never talk about their job, and there's no way to link themselves from their social media account to their professional ones.
I see. Okay. So what are some of the big developments or movements happening in cybersecurity now, either Taiwan or globally?
Well, globally speaking, what we see right now is basically, it's getting more and more sophisticated in terms of like the attacks, especially for cyber espionage. Used to be like you could, for example, for analysts, used to be you could analyze 2-3 samples in a day. Now, because of all the elaborate processes, especially all the anti-analysis measures that the actors would go through, if an analyst could actually go through 1 sample a day, that's an achievement. And also, the other thing is about the proliferation of military-grade like malware.
Right.
Because once it's out there, you could use it. And, of course, the top sensitive agencies, they would keep all their computers up to date. They would keep all the vulnerabilities plugged.
Didn't something happen with the CIA where they had their cybersecurity like tools hacked or like given out or something? That was like 1 or 2 years ago?
Yeah, that was actually like one of the big things, the Snowden leak actually provided us with, which I'm not really sure why people focus on other things, because this is really, really scary.
Could you explain the Snowden leak?
Oh yeah, so one of the main things that we learned from the Snowden leak is that the NSA have a combination of tools. One of them is called the Eternal Blue Sky, and the other is called the double pulsar. And basically they work in tandem to keep your computer, to access your computer and store data from it. And the scary thing is, like, it works on Windows computers all over the world. And it doesn't matter how up-to-date your computer is or what kind of software you have, because they're exploiting an inherent vulnerability with the Windows system. And so, it was estimated like basically NSA have access to all the world's Windows computer for about 10 years.
Oh, man.
So imagine what kind of information they could have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So why is this scary? It's because they had access for 10 years and the fact that it was on a global scale.
Yeah, the fact is, it's on a global scale. They have such a long access, and it's more about the fact that they have the capability to develop something like this. Because in terms of the attackers, because everything's changing so fast, it's always changing. So, even like obtaining something like the internal blue sky or double pulsar doesn't mean a thing unless you have a group of people that could continuously actually innovate, develop, and produce such a program, such a malware. And to have that capacity is scary.
I see.
Yeah.
How about here in Taiwan? Is there anything going on in the cybersecurity arena here?
Well, one of the jokes that we like to talk about is that it's easier to count the companies that hasn't been compromised. You could probably count all of them in one hand.
Right.
And, a friend of mine likes to make the joke that, oh my God, he's going to give me so much trouble. But the joke goes like this. It was like, there's only two kinds of company in the world. One that's already been compromised, and the other one that does not know that it has been compromised.
So basically, everybody's been compromised.
Yes, because there's an extreme asymmetry when it comes to attackers and defenders. It is next to impossible for the defenders to defend against an attack because the attacker has to change very little, and then the defender has to start the research all over again.
Right. So would you say an offense is the best defense in this approach? So would companies or even countries go on the offensive? Is that a prevalent strategy?
I would say, deal with this like an insurance, like a security risk, how you manage risks. So, for example, the Ministry of Defense's Security Operations Center, they use something called the Octave model. It's basically it's a theory derived from risk management. So it's never possible to block all the leaks. So you gotta compartmentalize and you gotta put it into different grades. And of course, the other point you brought up is about deterrence. Basically, you go on offensive and you try to scare people into not doing anything to you. But deterrence works on many levels. If you're talking about on a country-to-country or on an espionage level, it doesn't really work because the problem is attribution's hard. Like, even on the highest level, they cannot really be sure who's attacking who, or is it a government agency? Is it like an intermediary? So, yeah, on a very rare cases, you could actually see who's doing what. For example, the recent case would be the disclosure that the Dutch intelligence agency was able to verify through cams and everything that APT-29, Cozy Bear, associated with Russian intelligence, was actually behind the U.S. election attacks and also attacks against the House and the Senate.
Yeah. And the German parliament, right? Just recently. They were behind the German parliament attack, right?
That was never actually confirmed. Because the thing is, usually we would say yes, I'm 90% sure, I'm 100% sure. But unless you were able to combine this with other intelligence sources, you can never be really sure. Now, in the Dutch intelligence agency's case, they were able to do that because they literally hacked into the building before the Russians started hacking. So they have camera footage to go with what they're doing. So they're 100% sure about, that's the Russians.
Okay. So how did you get in the field of cybersecurity?
Well, I guess it's just my interest had always been in traditional security. But once you get to a point, you realize, wait, this is the latest leak. This is how information got out. And, and a lot of my friends doing this, and I started realizing there's actually a hidden war being fought every day without us even knowing about it. And so that gets me interested. And I started researching that, and I started writing articles. I started, studying the policy aspect of it. And there's very little people doing that, especially in Taiwan. So, that's how I got into it.
Yeah. Do you think there needs to be more attention paid to this?
Oh, definitely. But the thing is, I think it's also fair for people who's actually working within the industry or the government to actually advise people why we need to keep an eye on this, why this is scary, why does this concern them?
Right. Do you think it'd be too scary? Like if the regular person just knew just the scale of the cybersecurity attacks and just how frequent they were? Do you think it'd be kind of like a super demoralizing and kind of a damper?
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's easy to get demoralized because you realize how hard the job is. But then again, you can look at, what the attackers are doing and realize, wait, they're actually amateurs too. Because, aside from a few examples of dedicated state actors, and hell, even like, our primary antagonist, China, they're not really that good. They're just being very active. So
interesting. So who's good? I guess like which country around the world or which like agency or something is really leading the push in cybersecurity or just that arena?
Are we talking about offense or defense?
Could you tell me both, I guess?
Yeah, of course. In terms of like defensive measures, I guess everybody is as tough as can be because first of all, this is a new vulnerability that just opened up. The market is maturing. That means, there's enough companies around, there's enough organizations around, but we have a joke about the indicator of compromise. Basically, what an indicator of compromise is like, how, for example, your virus scanners like detect a suspicious file. But the problem is like everybody wants to provide the latest IOCs, but there's no universal standard to vet like what is good and what is bad. So basically an IOC is like looking for a needle in a haystack. And because I can't be sure where the needle is, so everybody's like, yeah, get me more hay. And that's the problem.
I see.
So we're actually moving much more toward like, quality now. So in terms of defense, the best ones are probably in Eastern Europe, just because of the fact that they are under constant attack from the Russians, and they have like serious implications.
So they like put the reps in, so they just gotten better through practice.
The one thing they're good at is actually a non-technical part. For example, technical part everybody could do, but the next step is, okay, how much time like the government agencies have to make a decision once important critical structures penetrated. If you know, like, your election's being tampered with, like a month after the election, would your government be able to respond to that? And, what kind of response would that be? And you got to talk to the policy coordinators. And nobody's been doing this as far as I know except the Eastern Europeans because they're actually facing this. And for example, in Ukraine, their power plants, their dams got turned off. At one point last year, 20% of the power in Ukraine was turned off by Russian actors. So for them, it's a clear and present danger. So they're good at it. In terms of offense, I would say like the best we have is probably the CIA, the NSA or the CIA. Even from WikiLeaks files, you could see like their evaluation of the Chinese software, the most advanced Chinese software. Their comments was essentially translated as, "This is nothing special. Let's move on. This is not even worth doing a POC, a proof of concept, because it's just too ordinary."
Wow, it's too rudimentary. Like
too rudimentary for them.
They're much more advanced than that.
Yeah. But the Russians are actually the Russians are very active and they're catching up. They've even tried different tactics in Ukraine. However, in terms of potential, that will be China. But in terms of like current activity, North Korea is being extremely active. And they're the one who started like mixing espionage and cybercrime because they're in extreme need for money.
Right. All right. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to cover or that you want to talk about?
Well, yeah. So basically, what I wanted to like remind everybody, it's more about a change in culture, because security is a mindset, just like cybersecurity is no different. And so basically, for example, Taiwanese companies until about 2-3 years ago, they still think dealing with a problem means basically getting rid of the people who brought them the problem. So, for example, if you are a hacker or you're a white hat is what we call hackers who turn good and working for the company. If you are a white hat and you brought a company a proof of concept that, hey, you have a vulnerability in your system, you might want to fix that and also maybe reward me for bringing this to you. They would sue you. Because the thing is, in order to prove they have a vulnerability, you gotta actually penetrate their system first and do a test. It might be harmless. You might just go into the computer and open their calculator.
But the fact is
you're in there. So they sue you. And
and this has happened here.
This has happened multiple times.
Wow.
That just, goes to show like the level of culture.
Okay.
So
yeah, the way they handle this.
Exactly. But so, I would say like basically people have to understand what the problem is and, design a system or policy in such a way that the incentives are correct, that the people who's getting screwed are the one who actually who get to say, whether I need cybersecurity or not.
All right, man. So thanks, Kitsch, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your time.
Oh, yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this week's Taiwan Talk. I want to give a special shout out to Kitsch Liao for coming into the studios and talking to me about cybersecurity. And I hope it was informative for you. Talk to you guys next week. I'm Alex Lewis.